Okay, welcome everyone. For those in Zoom world, we have about 50 people to start, and here in the restaurant, we have close to 50 as well. So it's great we're able to meet both those who are still more comfortable with the virtual setting and those who want to get out and start networking again. So welcome back everyone in the restaurant. Okay, most exciting news of the month is our chapter in the National Cancer Institute will be partnering up for a symposium in July. This will be a one-day symposium from 8 to 4, 7 PDUs, accounting for the lunch break. More information and registration will be open later this week. Some of our speakers include leadership techniques, Lisa and David, Mr. Carl Pritchard, and Dr. Joseph Martins, who hasn't spoken for us for a couple of years. So this will be a virtual symposium via Cisco WebEx. There'll be instructions on Cisco WebEx. I think more people are used to Zoom and Teams and Cisco, depending on where you work. So we'll make sure everyone has that information. And Dr. Chen, did you want to add anything?
No, you covered it all. Thanks, Matt. Essentially, we do have 7 speakers. We try to cover topics that will cover the 3 segments of the PMI talent triangle. So a mixture of soft skills and technical skills and some strategic skills as well. We believe we have a good lineup to entertain you for the full day. We're looking forward to have everyone join us again for our annual Member Appreciation Day, and the PDUs are free, and that's the way we like to have it, because the theme of or the impetus for our whole chapter is really it's all about the members, and we try to give back as much as possible throughout the year.
Great, thanks, Dr. Chen. And we know that traditionally we always had a spring education day and a fall symposium, so we owe you some PDs from 2020. So we're working on more content. Hopefully we'll be welcome back at Montgomery College for an education day, and then working with our friends at the Montgomery County office to get the Silver Spring Civic building again in October, November. So more to come, but we haven't forgotten. Okay, just heard from Dr. Cheng, we're getting more chapter members here face to face as the mass vaccination goes forward. So everyone's well, and we look forward to having everybody back together here very soon. We will be having a chapter board meeting in the next 30 to 45 days. So if you have any ideas on how the chapter experience can be improved, put that in our post-event survey that you'll receive tomorrow for this event. Everyone here today had a lovely 4-course dinner for the low price of $10. That'll be the norm for the rest of the year as we try to encourage more face-to-face networking, and of course our November dinner, which is our annual member appreciation dinner. We'll be back here, and that'll be the flaming on practice. We'll continue to offer you Zoom simulcasts. We know it's not a perfect experience as it was for the Zoom webinars or everything that's virtual, but we look forward to getting feedback on the survey, and we'll make any adjustments to make sure you're getting the value out. Seminars World has been successful. This used to be in more desirable locations, Florida, Arizona, face-to-face. PMI Global is adjusted to a virtual Seminars World. The next one is June 21st to the 24th. Unfortunately, this isn't free, but a lot of companies offer education and training allowances for the year. So if you haven't used that yet, this would be a great opportunity. Mr. Pritchard's going to talk on risk management in the virtual world and how Zoom and Teams and Cisco WebEx have brought new degrees of risk that we're probably not factoring in because we're just trying to get by through the day. Leadership techniques will talk team building in a hybrid environment, and Mr. Bruce Gay will talk about design thinking and how to integrate that in the projects. Our PMI Silver Spring chapter, sister chapter down 495, will be hosting their 8th annual symposium in a few weeks, Thursday, June 24th. Their theme is embracing change and resilience and the impact on project management. They do ask for a small fee just to help pay for virtual logistics, so $45 for both.
Do you want to cook? I am.
And then 20 if you can just do a morning or afternoon. So that's another great way to knock out some PUs and support one of our fellow chapters in the DC metro area. PMI has also launched a new organizational transformation series. It's how to cultivate change within the organization. They put some virtual twists on there of how to work better with your workers that were teleworkers or remote workers. Even in my own experience working for Air Force headquarters, we always looked at the remote workers who were in Colorado or Texas and weren't at the Pentagon differently. And I think the last 14 months has really shown us what it's like to be on the virtual end of the stick. And, this transformation series can help with those type of perspectives. You can earn a micro credential, so it's not a certification, but it's something you can turn your LinkedIn profile. With each new day, we get closer to the release of version 7 of the project management body of knowledge. That will be Sunday, August 1st. This will be a free download for all those who have valid PMI accounts on the PMI portal. As those who have taken the Pnp exam in this calendar year, you've seen some adjustments to the exam. It's a little bit less about processes and workflows and more about how the different ways project management is being done in the 21st century. And we're looking to bring in a couple of speakers, both virtually and in person, to talk about the changes to the PMBOK and just how project management is transitioning as we continue in the modern age. So stay tuned for that. Our education partners, many of which are teaching PMP prep for the new exam, are still in business. They're slowly starting to come back to face-to-face education, but they are offering a lot of great virtual content on their website calendar. We try to replicate their website schedules as much as we can. So stay tuned for that. And another way to use whatever education allowance your company has. And we're very happy to have Dr. Kollars here face to face. We didn't give her a whole lot of notice, and she adjusted. She has her family here, so she's currently an associate professor at the U.S. Naval War College. Commutes back and forth from Newport, Rhode Island for that. Multiple publications on cybersecurity, hackers, innovation, information assurance, as well as a featured speaker at top flight conferences. Not that this isn't her most treasured speaking engagement, but being a featured speaker at DEF CON and ShmooCons and these cons of the cybersecurity community and the hacker community, like bend over backwards and do raffles for her just to be in attendance really speaks to her pedigree. She's serving or has served as a fellow on multiple military institutes and military-related boards. And her most proud factoid is that bourbon has been in our world for 227 years, and she's one of the leading executive steward students and enthusiasts. So So we're very pleased to have Dr. Kollars here. Give us 30 seconds while we rotate the slide decks, and welcome Dr. Kollars.
That's definitely not me. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so I've titled this talk, "Is There Cyber in My Project?" And I wanted to make this a fairly short talk, so the answer is yes.
Good talk.
But before I start talking about those points, I do want to say thank you very much to Matt Lowy. He's an inspiration. He's a hustler. He's amazing at his job, and I would not be here had it not been for his invitation. He leads beautifully, and so I just, if we could just give him a round of applause for all the work. And for those folks who have yet to return to the in-person environment, I will say, folks, this is my first time to the Normandie Farm Restaurant, and it's as extraordinary as it looks in his Google reviews. And so I want to say thank you very much for inviting me here, and the food is fantastic. So when is the filet mignon?
November.
November. Got it. All right. So as Matt had indicated, so I guess I'm a project manager of sorts. I mean, I think you guys are all professionals at it, and sort of as an academic, which is my primary training, I kind of wave at it from time to time. And I do projects for the Navy, and so for that reason, I guess Matt thought I'd be a good person to talk about it. But most of what I do is talk about what is cybersecurity, what is information security, why is that important, and why do we have to start thinking about that? And I think the phrasing goes among most people we call InfoSec professionals. How do we bake security in? Right? People say this phrase, how do I bake in security? And baking in security isn't just a function of an engineering design or of a procurement program. Baking in security is part of your project. But you have to start orienting to the potential for information security threats to the project itself. And one of the things that Matt asked me to talk about was, how do you do this to a community? Now, I know a lot of you are actually quite hyper technical, or at least work in this space. So, if you want to go get a drink or take a nap, we can talk about that. But in general, I think just the more we can orient to the degree to which information security, the threat from hackers, or at least the bad hackers, there are good hackers too. So the threat from those actors, the better off we're going to be in the long run. And honestly, if you can think about it from the front end of the project, you're going to save yourself some grief and some money and some risk at the back end. And I'm not saying everybody needs to hire FireEye, right? We just got. The company just split today, by the way. So Fire and Randy are different companies now. But not everyone needs to hire a top-end cybersecurity firm in order to do your project. And in particular, for those of you who represent or are part of small and medium businesses, or for those of you who are part of smaller projects that maybe the larger company has not a whole lot of visibility into, you're better off thinking about this at the front end. Go ahead, Jim. Right. So it's been a pretty crazy year so far for those of us who work in cyber threat. So the threats were always there, the attacks were always there, but we're seeing a lot of it, and the degree to which it has rocked the foundation of the private sector, the public sector, of the government has been unprecedented. So everybody's having more informed and more important conversations about what the problem is. So I just had a couple of examples here. We had was it just yesterday, we had the ransomware attack on the beef processing plants, both the United States. It's a global organization, so they had to shut down processing in several places. The Colonial Pipeline, for those of us, can I see a show of hands? How many of you got a little bit scared about the fuel? Right. There were folks, right, so you couldn't drive at all, right? So you start thinking about how many miles it will take before I have to refill. So these are serious questions, right? And these are what we call critical infrastructure attacks, right? Things that we hadn't thought about before that are potential bottlenecks in our supply chain. And how do we protect those against these things that we can't see? Another one is going to be the Microsoft Exchange. Now, this is a little bit more, you may or may not know if your firm has been affected by the Microsoft Exchange attack. Does anyone know? This is a little more obscure. Oh, you do. Sorry. Right, so some of this is very clear. We can see it, right? Everybody knew it was happening. Some of it happened, and you may or may not know, right? Whether or not your firm was helped as part of that attack, whether or not its data is going to be released, whether or not any part of your project is exposed in some way, whether your participants, people who work on the projects are affected in some way. You don't know. And the hard part about cyber attacks is you only find out afterwards. You don't know at the front end before it's happening. So what do we have to do?
Start planning for it. Ransomware has been a really rough one for us. And if we want to talk about this in the Q&A, how do we get after ransomware in terms of policy, we can. And we can talk about things like cyber insurance and federal policy. But at a minimum, we need to start wrapping our arms around the way in which these problems, these cybersecurity problems are actually, they're everybody's job now, much in the same way that public health became everyone's job over the past year. So let's go ahead and jump ahead. All right, so the first lesson of cyber and cybersecurity, and this is the one that no one ever wants to talk about, is knowing yourself and your organization is the single best point of defense. The more you know about the devices you brought online, the more you know about who's working on your project, the more you know about how what they do with their smart devices, the more you know about where your project's going and who you're sharing it with, the better off you're going to be. That means that you have to plan for this, right? This is the front end. This is you guys. You got to think about, all right, what is our strategy for dealing with all the ways in which the electronic world touches my project? And you don't have to know a ton of technical things to make this work. You just have to know your project, right? Start thinking about all the ways in which it might touch the interconnected space we call the internet, to include your cell phone in your back pocket. So knowing yourself, the better you know, the better you plan, the better off and the more secure you're going to be, the less likely you're going to be caught on the back foot when that attack finally comes, because it will. It will. Some kind of exposure is going to happen. So preparing for it on the front end is the best you can do. Next slide. All right, so I want to talk more broadly just about what is the landscape, and this is sort of my bread and butter. This is the bigger picture work that I tend to do, and then I'll try and crawl into your back pocket on project management, and you can say, maybe it works or maybe it doesn't. An ongoing component, right? What is driving all these cyber attacks, right? Security is always underfunded, and will always be underfunded, right? You want to maximize on efficiency. You want to reduce costs, right? You want to deliver more for less and faster. That's appropriate. But that means that security will almost always be underfunded. So we have to make smart choices about where we're going to apply those thoughts. The Chief Information Security Officer should not be part of your IT organization. They should be part of your security organization. And more often than not, particularly in your small and medium businesses, the IT person is your Chief Information Security Officer. And now they're doing everything all at once. This is one of the major problems we're seeing grow over time. And because can you afford it? No, you can't afford a full-fledged security office as well as an IT office. So you try and mix them together. These are not always, they don't always have the same priorities. Your IT office is going to try and go for smoother, faster, better, more efficient. Security office is going to say, slow down, limit access. It's got this problem of usability versus security. There's a balance there. So think about that as you're starting your project. How much of this needs to go faster, cheaper, smarter? And how much of this needs to go, whoa, hold on. Let's be careful about what we do in this particular space. The core threat trends are the same ones we've seen for the past decade. Phishing, malware attacks, in particular on the rise is ransomware. Just plain bad cyber hygiene. Yes, the attackers are getting smarter, but it's the click of the people in your program. It's the click of your participants on your events. It's the click of the person who's doing the sort of the overall updates on your budget. That's where it's coming from. So make sure that's tight. This one people hate a lot. The Department of Homeland Security is not here to save you. And neither is Cyber Command. They don't care about you. So you're gonna have to figure out how to secure yourself, right? In many cases, not even if you're the Department of Energy. But that's not the point. The point is, there is no one out there. You have to start thinking about this because nobody's going to tell you exactly how to do it. And so just starting to think about how am I exposed, and I'll talk to you about the questions you can ask yourself just to make sure that you thought about how you might be exposed. All right, this is ongoing and will always happen, right? Criminals make their money off of your mistakes. That is the internet. Welcome to the internet. Criminals make their money off of your mistakes. So you have to start thinking, what kind of risk can you handle? The humans are going to human. They're going to get lazy. They're going to get tired. They're going to have to tune into their Zoom call, and they're going to multitask while they're working on their Zoom call, right? And you're going to get breaches, exposures, and problems. Insurance won't solve most of your problems. Yes, there is cyber insurance, but in most cases, it's not going to, particularly for small and medium businesses, it's not going to solve the problem. You need to start thinking about security. And then this last one, think about your threat environment. Any target, every target can be compromised if you work at it long enough. So knowing what your attacker might do, knowing who might be coming after you, don't get paranoid, just think about it, right? Who is likely to try and come after me? Where are the crown jewels in my business and how do I protect them, okay? Think about who's coming after you and see if you can try and protect yourself against it. All right, this is ongoing. This is decades old. These problems are decades old and we haven't resolved them, which means we all have to get better at doing this because no one's coming in to save you. This is such an uplifting talk. All right, next slide. Okay, so here's a few things that you can, as a non-technical manager, if you're a technical manager, you can just, you can get a drink or something, but all right, so we want to think, all right, I'm at the front end of this project. I need to think about, someone says I got to think about security. I don't want to think about cyber. What is cyber anyway? So you need to ask yourself, all right, for this project, what devices do I need? Am I bringing in brand new devices to my organization, or am I using stuff they've already got? Stuff they've already got? All right, okay. Brand new devices? Go, take a second, right? Here's the conversation you need to have with your security officer. Hey, I'm bringing in brand new devices. Okay, what are those devices? How secure are they? Can I sit down and change the default password? What people am I bringing into the project? What kinds of ways can I go around figuring out what their practices are? I mean, so bringing on a bunch of experienced professionals, okay. Bring on a bunch of 18-year-old interns, entirely different click process on that machine, right? So you want to think about which people you're bringing on because that changes what the behavior set is, right? What data are you going to be using? What work product are you producing out of it? And for how long do you need to hold it? If you haven't thought through the life cycle of your data, you need to start. How long does my organization have to hold on to this data? Make a plan to erase it after time. Don't let it hang out there forever. Why? Because someone's going to go looking for it at some point. Don't hang on to data longer than you have to. Everybody's birth date, social security number, right? The moment you don't need it, plan to get rid of it. Get it out of your system. Plan for that data and for how long you have to hold it. The more you hold it, the longer you hold it. If you don't know what data you're holding, that makes you a threat. What licensing do I need? I'm bringing on a new project. We're bringing on all kinds of brand new software. Have you asked your security office what licenses they carry? How many people can use that license? And what is that company secured for? You need to have that conversation. Hey, we're bringing on this new software. It's called Internet Explorer. Super secure. It's not, right? And so you want to have that conversation with your security office. What is safe? What can I use? Will this be a bring your own device environment? That happens. You've got a whole sorts of people. You can't afford to buy them all brand new computers to work on that project. You just need to know at the outset, is this a BYOD? Great. What's our licensing? What data are we working with? These are very, you don't have to know the state of the art in malware phishing. You just have to understand what your project is doing. Does my org have an existing protocol for what I'm about to do? This is a really interesting question when we came into the pandemic, when everybody decided to jump on Zoom. Wasn't a third security threat at all, right? So you have to think about that. Is my organization, does it just ask, does it have a protocol so that I might know it, right? Are there periods that we can anticipate of non-access? If I have a group of people who are working on this night and day, and my security office decides that it's going to reboot and do all the upgrades on Wednesday night just before I deliver my product, I might want to know that, right? How sensitive is the work? I know a good number of you folks work for the government, right? You want to know how sensitive it is. How do you protect it? Again, right back to that data question. What data am I holding and for how long do I have to hold it? And the minute you don't need it, you need to get rid of it. Are the employees local, global? Are they all working online? Are they distributed? Back one, good, yeah. How useful are my participants in good cyber hygiene, right? Do they click everything? And then are there data sharing plans? I have this project, I have this work product. Do I get to share it with everybody? Am I restricting access? You want to just make those kinds of plans, right? Just make it, just think, all right, with who am I going to share the work product? Does anyone else get access? No. Just be very, very careful of how you plan your data. All right, next slide.
So I think that a lot of small and medium companies and like your entrepreneur who's just starting out, like looks at like Marriott, who a lot of our chapters workforce, since that's one of the bigger employers in Montgomery County, like they lost 9 million customer records in 2020. SolarWinds, which like is a reputable like IT company that you would think would have better cyber posture to have the international incident the SolarWinds had. And if these companies with billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars to invest in their infrastructure can't get it right, what chance does your everyday entrepreneur?
So I will say this much. The smaller the target you are, unless you're dealing with very bespoke clientele, you're a smaller target. You're less likely to attract Russian hackers who are trying to make Bitcoin off of your system. I don't know what explains today's hit. There was a ransomware attack on the Martha's Vineyard ferry system. I don't know if you're tracking that. Anyway, I'm not sure which group was responsible for this, but it's sort of small potatoes compared to, say, Colonial Pipeline. So again, knowing who's going to target you is the most important part of making this assessment, right? So if you leave your files sort of open access on some Google Drive and you're not restricting who gets access to it, or you're not making choices about when to destroy that data, somebody will eventually find it. But if you're making smart choices, you're standing up your file sharing, you're thinking about how to restrict access just on Google Drive, just take G Suite, open it up and say, nobody, no access except for this person with 2-factor authentication, and it's over. And if you don't know the answer, just make a phone call if you have a security office. And if you don't, call me, right? But smaller businesses, unless you have something really, really valuable to hold, are less of a target. So there's a reason why JP Morgan Chase and in fact, all of your global HBSCs have spent more on their cybersecurity protection than Cyber Command. They spend more because they're protecting the money, right? So it's not surprising, right? So everybody's making their investments based on the kinds of targets they think they're coming at. You are not JP, I mean, maybe you are, right? But your projects hopefully are not JP Morgan Chase. So start thinking about, how do I just make this is going to sound terrible. It's like that joke about the bear and your friend and tennis shoes. You just have to outrun your friend. That's kind of where we're at right now in cybersecurity. So just make sure that you're locking it down tight enough that people wander off, because it's just harder than what it is to get access to your data.
Then there's a question on chat about, it appears that less funding is being given for cyber posture. Would you agree with that in your professional opinion?
And it depends on what we mean by cyber posture. So, so I look at this from the DoD perspective. And so, one, they've expanded and they're continuing to expand Department of Homeland Security's CISA, right? The critical infrastructure. CISA is getting a major expansion in funding. And so I think that the philosophy regarding what's happening with cybersecurity is shifting from, let's just do offensive work, let's just go out and punch people with the cybers. And we're shifting toward maybe we should get our houses in order and try and secure and make sure that we're up to date with our own stuff. And I will tell you this much, it's a lot harder to think through the tens of thousands of different companies and businesses and networks that exist in the United States, that hold the value of what we have in this country in terms of marketplaces and capitalism. It's hard. And so I don't think we're increasing fast enough, that funding, but I think the money we spend on offensive, I think we should be more careful with it, because I'm not sure that, I have yet to see good data on it being effective. All right, so next slide. This is the easy one. If there's anything in your project that's public, you need to stop and slow down. You have the privacy of the people who participate in all of your public events. You need to think about their data. You need to think about who has access to that event. And maybe it's a public event, and I get it, right? But you need to start being careful. In particular, because cybersecurity is now increasingly wrapped up with internet online trolls, with disinformation, with misinformation, and with social media. And so if you don't think about the potential for something that you say or something that happens at your event to go viral and cause problems or headaches for your project, you just think it through. And it does mean you have to start controlling a little more who has access to your Zoom, who has access to your public event, who you let in. But you just want to know going in, is this a potentially big political football? Okay, maybe I shouldn't make it fully unregistered. Maybe I shouldn't make it, right? Start thinking through anything that's public facing, a public product, a public event. Stop, slow down, and think about, what do I need to do to manage not just who's working on this project, but the people who are coming in to talk about it. It's the kindest thing you can do to people to attend your meetings, to think about their privacy and security as well, right? All right. Sorry, well, I was thinking about this project today, I thought, and then there's the pandemic, and I don't know how anybody in their project management scope's like, and by the way, just in case there's a pandemic, here's how I'm planning to do this. But I think it taught us a lot of things about how to be adaptive. And so there were a lot of things that, so working for the Department of Defense, working for the Naval War College, there's an in-person requirement that we suddenly had to figure out how to pivot out of. We had to sort of figure out, how do we do our work on a regular basis for the Navy in a way that's useful, but also secure and protected. And it took us a while, and there was a lot of, we have no idea if we can do this. This doesn't make any sense, right? There's no way that the Department of Defense does anything unclassified. All the different human bodies scattered to safer places. What do we do now about the fact that we need to communicate with those people? All of a sudden, we had this giant information security problem. How do we make sure that they're all using good cyber hygiene, that they've got virtual private network access, VPN networks, right? They have VPN access, make sure that everybody's doing the right protocols. In protection, because humans are going to human. So our system, our particular VPN, the way that we got to our virtual desktops would take on average, that's where I get in trouble, about 10 minutes to get in. Or you could try and sort of like do the work on the side through your Gmail account, right? It's a little faster if you did it that way, right? Making sure that people were trying to stay compliant, despite the fact that it's so much easier to go this other way. It's just faster with my Gmail account. Sure, can't do that, right? You can't do the DoD's business on your Gmail account, right? We've learned that the hard way. Any kind of pivot that you make that pushes people out of their usual comfort zone in terms of practices is going to hurt. But you have to make sure that that end user can do what you're asking them to do. I don't know how many of you ended up with like multi-factor authenticators you had to attach to your computer, right? Everyone had to sort of, those of us who worked in the DoD environment, we had to bring home these pieces of technology and attach them to our machine and then load something up. Half of the people in my office were incapable of doing the technical adjustments on their own machines. So they couldn't do their work. So it's not just that they can do it, but that they will do it and that they'll do it reliably. Thinking your way through that will make your team incredibly resilient, right? Again, it was crazy. We had no way to imagine this was going to happen. And yet it took us about a month to figure it out. We don't yet know what that pivot will cost us in terms of exposure or breaches, because humans are going to human, and they're going to find faster, easier ways that bypass your security protocol. We're going to have to worry about that in the long run. But hopefully we've learned a lot from pandemic to sort of think about what does it mean to work in this other way, and hopefully those lessons will reapply as we go forward. All right, I think I have exceeded the. Let's see what the next slide looks like. Yep, that's it. so in case of those of you who have not seen before what it looks like for being what's called a watch floor. So I don't even think this is an actual photograph of Cyber Command. It might be Coast Guard's look or whatever. But anyway, these offices have, okay, well, they almost never have code. That makes no sense. There's a lot of world maps and a lot of graphs. But yes, this is essentially just sort of like, working for the DoD, I've seen a lot of offensive or sort of cyber behavior, sort of cyber offices. They almost never look this great. At the end of the day, it's some person with like a binder and a clipboard. So just, you don't have to be technical to understand these things. You just have to think about what you're exposed to. And if you have any follow-up questions and or random policy questions about hackers or federal policy, or I'm opening the floor. Yes.
Thanks for the talk. Recently, the Deputy Secretary of Defense moved their chief data officers that were hired last year out CIOs, and the duty has a data strategy on the street also. What seemed, from your perspective, to be the impetus for doing something like that? And I ask that in the context of the strategy, pretty much putting people on notice that I want no kidding inventories of the data that essentially could be lost or compromised.
So I think that there are two movements going on for moving them out and down, and that's going to be formatting and protecting our data, but also making use of the data that the Department of Defense has access to. So there are two problems being tackled in that case. One is understanding actually what are devices are. We go back to the slide. What devices? Where are they located? Right. So just getting an honest map of what is on our network, where is it, and how are those people behaving in terms of compliance? Right. The sort of cybersecurity maturity model stuff. But the second half of that is the notion that we can perform better, more effectively as an organization, one of the world's largest organizations, if we only understood our information better. So information science or data scientists they're like gold at this point. And if you can get them into these offices, not only do you find out kind of how do you secure this data better, but also what data are you holding? Because I think one of the interesting parts about DoD's data structures is that there isn't one. And so we don't quite know what information is being held where. So it's a double-edged strategy to both just know thyself right? But also then what can I do now that I have that information? If I know exactly the, sort of the readiness levels down to the smartwatch heart rate of all of my folks, what better can I do? How can I more effectively operate? So I think it's a double-edged a strategy there. So partially just to get better at doing what we do with information science. Yeah.
As a program manager, like I'm signing a few authority to operate documents like every week. And I understand a little bit. I review page by page because I think that's just good posture. If you put your digital signature on anything, you should at least read it. But I don't know what I'm looking at. Like I'm a cost schedule performance guy, not a vulnerability and like so. Not having the time or discipline to be a CISSP, like what would you're 8570 compliant, you have your security plus, but that's a check in the door essentially. Kind of what the PMP is turning into for project management. Just because you have a security plus doesn't mean it's the equivalent of high school diploma anymore. So, but what recommendations do you have to better for program and project managers to before they sign things to better understand them without taking the time of the people that are doing the work?
Sure. All right. So I thought you had one direction of the question, and then so you'll pivot on me. So what I'll say first is what you're talking about in terms of like certification and training and making sure that you have all the boxes checked, right? So that's something that I'm also watching happen in the hacker space as people, right, in the IT security space and cyber security space, which is that there's an endless list of qualifications and certifications and education that you can add to your resume. And at the end of the day, in your heart of hearts, you recognize that you can have all those certs and still have zero actual experience doing the job. And that's a problem. Because if you don't have a lot of experience doing the job, then what you have is a stack of certs that make you technically certified, but not actually comprehensively understanding how to improve. And so for that first part of the question, I would say, at least in the hacker space, they say, there's nothing takes the place of experience and practice. Get in there, do stuff, learn more, but also try and do more projects, try and do more, in this case, hack everything you can. Right, so I think that's part of this balance between a profession and a practice, getting certified, but also knowing what you're doing by the feel of it, right? The art and the science of what you're doing, especially because you folks deal with humans full time and you can certify all day long and you can check boxes on compliance all day long. It doesn't make you any better at working with humans. So that's part of that problem. How do you learn enough? How do you learn enough to smell when something's wrong? I don't know. I mean, this is as a lot number of you are career government workers. You've a full-time job, and then you have the boxes you have to check to be in compliance. And at the end of the day, you do your job, and then you try and check all the boxes, all the different kinds of training you have to do. In this case, for the Navy, it's like 30 some odd plus hours of training every year, right? It feels arbitrary. You check out and check the box. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but we have to figure out how to make that translatable, comprehensible, understandable in English, right? In English, make it work so that people, as they're reading something, understand exactly what they're looking at.
This question, you want to state the question on the microphone?
Oh, what is happening or has happened to FISMA? What is FISMA? I can try and guess my way through the acronym. Anyone? FISMA? Oh, good Lord. That I don't know doesn't mean it's not important. It just means I'm unfamiliar with that particular, is it a mission assurance program? Do you know? So here's what I will say. There's a lot of policies. I mean, this, again, we're back to this other problem, right? I cannot name all of the different policies that we're talking about in terms of compliance with cybersecurity regulations, information assurance, that somehow is different, right? And just so all of that, right? We're right now we're swimming in a soup of different compliance and regulations. We don't know when they're going into enforcement. We don't know if anyone's going to enforce them, and you feel like you're just sort of rolling the dice every time. right? Maybe this time I'll be in compliance. I don't know. This, again, we're in a bad moment for security to sort of find our way through this. So I have to admit, like, I haven't heard of FISMA, but it might just because I'm on the DoD side of the spectrum. Yes.
So this is a little bit broader question. But do you see, or would you entertain that one of the root causes to the ability to do some of this static analysis as to why foods are broken, or student gaps between experience education for the positions and accountability? Is that rooted in the fact that we still, as the DoD, do not produce enough machine readable information first? So, the data call still exists, and this should be an anachronism by now. And what should be accessible to you is still at the whim of someone who is willing to, not someone else, right? Especially when you go out of your organization. So I just don't see how we're going to get the velocity for someone who gets a very temporal privilege to draw a lot of, rule bases together and say, you need to fix these several things in order to kind of get this massive flow to go as fast as you want with less error and less risk. But the whole machine readability, even though it's been in the Government Performance Modernization Act for years, even the current Data Act, I just don't see it. I'm an enterprise architect with Cyber Command headquarters, so I've got a little bit of insight.
You're not here to save us.
No.
So not to hum along in harmony with your despair. Just in terms of thinking about organizations, right? And so the structure of the DoD is that it fights itself, and that's for important reasons. But then it fights itself, which means it creates all sorts of reasons to not harmonize all the data. Right, so the services have a reason to, right, I'm going to hold it at my level. Everybody, this is not new. This is not specific to governments, by the way, right? Corporations have a reason to hold the data. Why can't we get cybersecurity firms to just share more with the government? Why can't we get them to share all the threats? Because it's not in their profit line, right? The incentives don't align perfectly. And if they do, yes, you'll see a lot of stepping in the line and making all of it come together. But it's the US government, I think for very good reasons, is not a top-down institution, but that creates these data problems where people hold their data in separate spaces. And so we're not going to, I don't think I would be terrified to find a DoD that synchronized all its data. Because it would mean a whole bunch of structural changes that would make me worried. But artificial intelligence is what people tend to say about this moment in time. Well, once artificial intelligence and unstructured data come into place, we'll be fine. But the reality is, like, I think there's just too many equities in holding data at this point. But anyway, so this is one of the bigger information problems. Until you can force an organization to give over its data, until you can force it to, they're going to hold it. Oh goodness, I don't know actually what security certifications I recommend for project management professionals. I will when I was talking to some friends of mine at different firms today. I don't know if you know this at all, but probably like you guys, they all have like a separate Slack channel or on Discord, and they all talk behind everybody's back. But they were all chatting today, so I can throw that out there, and I'll get you guys an answer on the back end. Like, what certifications do you think are appropriate? What isn't going to burn all your time or money, frankly, because cybersecurity certifications are expensive. There's a whole market out there, and they want your money. If it's someone else's money, get it. But if it's not, then let's think about where your money's going. So I will find out those answers and send those along to you.
Yep, and to be 8570 compliant, to work on a lot of projects, to be a sysadmin for like a Salesforce or a ServiceNow, Security Plus is like the easiest to get.
That's the one.
CompTIA.
Okay, CompTIA, right? So and CompTIA requires no
Prerequisites.
Yeah, no actual internship time, no practitioner time. CompTIA is there's some really great courses out there. CompTIA will give you, honestly, I think not to throw shade on CompTIA, the stuff that they have in CompTIA will get you the orientation and the language you need to understand your CISO, your Chief Information Security Officer. You won't be able to do the job, but you'll at least understand when they're talking about the CIA, when they're talking, and it's not our intelligence agency, right? It's not that, right? When they're talking through their security language, how they were trained up. CompTIA will, for the lowest money, and will get you to a space where you can at least understand what people are saying, orient to their language. Considering local area, what schools provide the best cybersecurity training and/or education? It depends on where you're going. So schools are picking their, schools are kind of spreading out across the different cybersecurity marketplace in terms of, do you want to go and do DoD work on the offensive side? And you might want to go kind of over in this space. For private sector, I don't know who's doing all the good work for private sector at this point. But there's every master's program out there that's worth its salt has stood up a cyber component. Who did I see was doing really cool work? I think it was George Mason was making a serious bid in this space to give you the technical capabilities. A lot of people will do the sort of the softer side, right? We'll do the sort of social, scientific, organizational study stuff, but I think it's George Mason that's standing up a serious attempt at getting people soup to nuts on the network security, and then sometimes kind of like that the higher end, like endpoint detection. I'm just saying words now, but they do mean something. Threat hunting capability, that's being taught. And otherwise, honestly, SANS, if you've got the money, SANS online and SANS in person out west is sort of the gold standard. Yes.
And one initiative that the Air Force CIO, Laura Nossenberger, started is Digital U. So, because she doesn't want everybody just in the career field of IT and cyber to be learning. She wants the entire Air Force. So regardless of if you're a E3 in Ohio, I've always looked at being technical as having the desire to learn and to read, and then having the opportunity. So with Digital U, at least for the Air Force, for total force, active duty, reserve guard, civilians like myself, she's providing the opportunity to learn. They've partnered with Pluralsight and Udemy, which are a lot of good CBT, computer-based training certification courses. But she's providing the opportunity to become technical to the entire, 700,000 plus Air Force with civilians. What will you do with the opportunity? So, and in taking some of the Pluralsight and Udemy classes, I mean, that's a good start too. Whether or not you want to be certified and have to renew your certification every year, that's a different story. But if you just want knowledge to become the best project manager you can be, those are good virtual options.
Yeah. Also, if you're just if you're Googling at random on a Wednesday night, you want to think about the online learning environment is sort of as sort of posited by YouTube. You want to be thinking about the defensive side or the blue side. So if you look for some blue courses as opposed to red courses are offensive. You can learn about that. But honestly, if you're thinking about project management, unless you're doing something weirdly offensive, I would just say, like, if you see somebody say, like, we're here for blue team training, and you're like, sweet. And that's just how do you defend yourself better? And it's all they're saying is how do you defend yourself better. So most of my hackers just train themselves by YouTube, and you can too. But there's probably more efficient ways to get at it. But YouTube is free, at least currently. Other questions? I'm sorry, we haven't been. Go ahead. What is the solution in the outlook? Do we have the right tools for cybersecurity? We're working with application companies for standards, qualification, authenticity, security, and testing. I mean, so I'm optimistic. Like, we're going to get hit left and right. We're going to keep getting hit left and right. So we have to stop thinking about this as some kind of weird war fight. Like, it's just not a useful analogy. I was a big proponent of, like, think of this as public health and hospitals, right? The doctor is not promising that they're going to keep you healthy for the rest of your life. The doctor is saying, get out there, do good things, take care of yourself, but also if you end up back in here, I'll put you back on your feet. Now get back out there, eat good food, exercise, right? That is the state. That is the state of how it's going to work. And that, you know, like, we have to become comfortable with that. We have to become comfortable with the fact that we're all responsible for our own organization's health and well-being. That somebody's not going to zoom in and help us. So you have to get up in the morning and go for the run, or eat, you know, or drink a little less or something. Right? Think about what your threats are and then manage those. And at the end of the day, you can still go to the hospital. Someone's going to help put you back on your feet. Hopefully the damage isn't too much. It's the better way to think about it. So do we have all the right certifications and qualifications and protocols? Every body is different. Every company is different. So you just need to make sure that you're thinking about it for the space that you're in. That's your end of the requirement, and somebody will help you with the technology. You just have to know what it is you're working with. I need this many computers. I need it for this amount of time. I have this kind of worker. All right, now let's talk about security. Oh, and I have this much money. We have to think about that part too, right?
So it's interesting to bring up the public health analogy. I know that works a lot. I'm just, could you dig a little bit deeper into that? Because as soon as you talk about either the equivalent of going from farm to fork versus you actually consume it and how your body gets something out of it, you know, those are two major different phases of this notion of public health.
That's right.
And now we're getting into disclosure about the software that you're buying, right? We're not talking about reading the size 4 font ULA that's 2,000 words that no one actually reads. When you're talking about the data you might create or giving up your right for usage of how you're using my software, et cetera. And this is where the government comes into play.
That's right.
Okay, so a big policy thing based on the comments in the past and questions just now is like education. So do you see, even as the military, you know, when generals were complaining about why are you taking away recess, because a lot of my recruits can't run because they got shin splints because they didn't have recess, and they don't run enough in max. The state's controlled curriculum, if we're going to be trading off those 182 days of school, say you got to put some more Social Security in there. Yeah, or not Social Security, it's cybersecurity. How much is going to be compulsory to graduate so that we don't have to pick up the slack for the 1 or 2% who wants to volunteer? Are you hearing those kind of discussions, you know, at staff level, or let alone just the policy around software? Like, hey, if you want to sell here, this is how much disclosure about what's in your software. It has to be known. The public needs to be able to take a look at your practices to see how your product is important to consumers.
Right. I mean, so this is, so I think the answer that makes people uncomfortable is it's nothing is going to be like, nothing's going to be good enough. Like that makes people super uncomfortable, right? So in particularly when we think about like sort of military readiness, right? And sort of how many hours of training, right, our soldiers do to be ready for the fight, and what, you know, when they're constantly like, this is a real problem for the UD. Like, how do I keep my guys ready? Mostly guys, getting better. How do I keep my folks ready for the fight? They're constantly juggling. What do I need to learn versus like, how do I drill and train? How to keep my body ready? How to keep my mind ready? Also, what kind of fight am I doing, right? And this is a real problem for the Department of Defense. And I think it's actually uniquely difficult for the Department of Defense. And I don't think they're any good. There's going to be a loser in that, and that's depressing, but it's just true. I think but the good news is for the broader civilian world, I think there's space. I think there's space for a population of kids who are growing up, looking at new career paths, looking at just what the day-to-day responsibilities are on computers. They're digital natives, but they're kind of dumb about it, right? And so thinking about how they can train, how they can orient to the challenge, I think is the easier challenge than this very complicated community that has in so little time, and right, and you're pushing them right to the edge, and then get out there, and then you're come back here and train for 12 hours on this computer, and it's like, I don't think that's going to work, right? So it's a crush, and I think if you invite Dr. Brister back, he will talk to you about those kinds of trade-offs. Yes, he will. So he's got the inside loop on thinking about those kinds of trade-offs, the difference in the complication of those families, even, right? But I think for the wider civilian space, policies are increasing. More pressure is being put on companies to disclose, more pressure is being put on companies to develop software securely, or at least show their homework. More pressure is being, more companies are being forced into thinking about, okay, wait, how do I do security on the front end, rather than just, I'm going to create this Internet of Things object and throw it out into the consumer space, and good luck, everybody, it's got a default password that you can't quite figure out how to change. Those regulations are coming. They're hard won. Medical devices are a phenomenal example of how the hacker community brought it to and worked with the FDA to really work at increasing those, getting it on the front end, letting hackers play with it and fight the system and try and subvert the medical devices to see if they can to really increase that security level, and then getting medical device producers to think about it carefully. And so, is every sector going to see it at the same time? No. Has the financial sector got it nailed down? Pretty tight, right? Where's the money and how does it work? So some sectors are better off than others. I think again, my heart goes out to people who are working for small and medium businesses, trying to figure out, I've got $10 to put toward a license to buy software. How do I keep my system safe? I have no idea. Right? That's the hard one.
A few rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Wrap up.
How can I become a forensic computer security? A white hat hacker. Oh, you can reach out to me. Reach out to me at the Naval War College, and I will introduce you. Becoming a white hat hacker. So there's a certification you can do. It's called being an ethical hacker. You can do it if you want to, but all my white hat friends say it's a certification, it's a compliance, and when you're done, you don't actually know how to be a hacker. The right way to go into being a white hat hacker is to spend time around other white hats. There are very important it's boring to be a white hat, because being a white hat is about documentation, not about just breaking things. And so learning how to document properly, learning how to behave appropriately when you know you've crossed a gray line, how to notify the company that you're tripping up against what's called the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. You don't want to get arrested if you're doing good faith research. So if you're trying to get into that space, I would go to a website called disclose.io and learn about what it is to get safe harbor. And that is, you're doing good faith research to test the system. Learn about that first. Learn what are the rules to disclosing to a firm or an organization what you're doing, and then start learning the skills. Learn the limits first, because if you do it the other way around, there's a likelihood you're committing a felony. And it's not a career breaker, but it's difficult to try and get known as a white hat after you've been arrested as being a malicious hacker. So be careful about that. Doesn't DoD have, or is training a cyber core? Yeah, so DoD is working as fast as it can to recruit anybody who has any kind of cyber talent, red team, blue team, just plain data science. They are. The problem with DoD at this point is that they can't outcompete the private sector. So even when they do train them up, if you're not being made to do the sexy thing, the cool offensive stuff, Google will pay you more and let you work remotely. And so we have to think about it. So DoD is trying its best, but I honestly don't think we do this country, given the way that we structure our data. I don't think we do this country any good by putting all of our cyber talent inside Cyber Command anyway. Right? We need everybody protecting every part of the network, and so if we distribute those bodies out, we're in a better shape. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the role of audits for market organizations?
I mean, so the critical infrastructure sectors, the ones that really are systemically important in the United States, right? We find out like, oh, fuel pipelines might be important, right? I think that there is. I don't think it's optional. I think if you're a major water provider to Manhattan, you had better be able to be open to audit. Mandatory reporting and higher standards for cybersecurity maturity. Absolutely. And if it costs you money, we'll think about federal grants. But at the end of the day, like there are some countries or companies or systems that are more important than others by definition. And we have to get braver about saying, this is the boundary. You've got to make it work. Yes.
Working in that, I can say that the problem is they auditing and making sure we're doing the right things.
Don't know what they're doing. Yeah, this is the competency. This is the competency problem. So one of the things that we talk about on the Navy is the cyber maritime end of the spectrum, and the Coast Guard is trying to stand up and train cyber auditors so that when they go into these spaces and say, wait a minute, right? Your ECDIS, right? Is that secure? Are you running that encrypted or not? Sure. Okay, right? So just making sure that we have a community that has the capacity to understand what they're looking at is, again, a big part of this sort of training and development. It's an opportunity for people's kids to get a really cool paying job that does good stuff, right? But again, putting those education systems into place, that's money. So it's going to be a bit. So we just kind of got to strap in and hold on as tight as we can through this really horrible time. But I think we'll get there.
We'll be back next month. Like, all come back. We like doing that. We get 4 big speakers. Yeah, you all are. Please drive carefully.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate the patience. Have a good night.